You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. We'll take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Hello, everybody. My name's Mark. We're also joined with Basil. Today it's the Out There Hour. We're going to have a jolly good time investigating crystal skulls.
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Yay! Wow.
We fell off the edge.
Life on the edge.
How are you this afternoon?
Not too bad, not too bad. Quite excited, moderately giddy.
Yeah, same here. I'm a little bit nervous.
My giddy is slight to moderate, force 6.
We're talking to a real-life Indiana Jones.
I thought you weren't going to say that.
You begged me not to say that, didn't you? Yes, sorry.
I hope he doesn't listen to this, because he's going to come for you in the night.
Picture Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Is that what it's called? I couldn't remember. I thought it was World of Strange Powers or something. I couldn't remember the name of it.
It's had some different names. When I was watching, it was Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
It was World of Strange something when I saw it.
And one of the spooky things on the beginning of it was this great
the intro, yeah.
crystal skull.
Massive big thing.
Massive big thing.
But look massive anyway.
And that's what we're here today to discover.
Ooh.
What is the crystal skull?
I think there's more than one.
And I think there's more than one. And we're speaking to expert.
Expert, yes. The expert.
Joshua Shapiro.
Yep. He is world-leading expert on crystal skulls. There's no other way of saying it. He's the go-to guy for crystal skull.
Yeah, he's the expert on it, so that's why we're going to ask him today.
Yeah. We've got a lot of questions to ask him. Well, I'm looking forward to it. He's quite big. He's in his own. I think he's got a series going on TV soon as well. I think he mentioned.
Yeah, he's often been on the Discovery Channel on American TV.
Yeah,
anything to do with crystal skulls.
Yeah.
Joshua's the man to speak to.
Yep, indeed.
We've got some questions ourselves.
Yes, indeed.
Along the lines of...
What on earth are they?
What on earth are they?
Where they came from. What is more interesting is I've been looking at his website, and I've been looking at one of his webinar type things. They're actually using new ones, and they use them. They are actually a tool.
They're a tool for spirituality and
some kind of conduit, I think.
Perhaps even psychic power, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But these things, we were discussing them recently, Mark. They're thousands of years old. There's some of them that are thousands of years old.
Yep.
And the technology wasn't there to create them. So how on earth were they made?
Yeah.
Could be something we could ask him.
This is it. Yeah, we shall have to do that.
It looks like you're gearing up to ring him already.
I'm geared. Shall we go over to him?
Let's take the plunge.
Okay, all things being equal, we should now have Mr. Joshua Shapiro on the line. Do we have you there, Mr. Joshua Shapiro?
Let me check. It's still early morning here. Yes, I'm definitely here and ready to go.
Excellent. Well, we were just doing a little bit of an intro there, but our lack of knowledge in crystal skulls is tremendous.
It's evident.
It's great. So we did what we could, but you are the go-to guy for crystal skulls. So, where do we start with crystal skulls? What are they?
I think the most obvious question: what is a crystal skull?
Yeah,
and how would you define it?
Well, there's two definitions that I would give to it. One is the traditional definition that most people use, which is exactly as the term implies. We're talking about a skull that's made out of different types of gemstones, which could be in the shape of a human bone skull or a human type of skull. And initially, when the crystal skulls first came out, they were, more like human bone skulls. But as we've progressed and we've gone into the 21st century, we now have modern carvers that are making crystal skulls from every type of gemstone you can imagine, and also in all different shapes, not just human bone, but also animal, monkey, dragon, whatever you can imagine, the people are carving it. And so they're just today compressing all of it. But there are three different types of, let's say, quartz crystal skulls or older skulls that are talked about, which is either contemporary or new, which would be the ones made by modern carvers today, primarily using diamond tip tools.
Yeah.
There would be old crystal skulls, which would be ones made 100 years ago to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. Different researchers.
They're the ones that we were just mentioning that we used to have a TV program over here called Arthur C. Clarke's. What was it called?
A Mysterious
World. Yeah, and on the beginning there was a crystal skull, and we've all seen reports of these old crystal skulls that date back to a long time before the technology existed to make them.
Right.
What can you tell us about those? Because literally, I think we know very little about them other than they're mysterious.
Right. Well, the ones that you're talking about have been called ancient crystal skulls, which are the ones made from, say, over 2,000 years to whenever, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000.
Yeah.
And so for these, basically what happened is in the 1800s, there were a number of these skulls that were coming out of Mexico near or within ancient ruins like Mayan or Aztec ruins.
Right.
And eventually some of them went into museums, and then people who had them privately started sharing them or selling them. And just as we went into the 20th century, more of them came out. But the problem with the ancient skulls, as far as I know, there isn't an exact scientific technology that we can use that can clearly define, how old is the creation of a skull.
Yeah.
For example, in some of the recent documentaries, what they've done is they've looked for carvers' tool marks on the surface of a crystal. Like if you take a modern skull and used a high-powered microscope, you'd probably see circular tool marks or different marks on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So this has caused some difficulty because some of the skulls that we believe to be ancient, or I'm calling them very old, some of them have these tool marks, and it could be a situation where, let's say, the head Mayan shaman says to his master carver, look, I don't like the way the skull looks. I want you to change it. And as soon as their tools touch the skull, then for, say, archaeologists or scientists, they say, oh, no, this is a fake. It's a modern made skull. Maybe it was done in Germany. Eder Oberstein in Germany has a lot of amazing carvers there who are very skilled and considered to be master carvers.
Yeah.
So then what happens is another way to identify them is to work with people who are sensitive. So I'm assuming that's part of what being out there means, working with the spiritual and the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the challenge is when you place some of these very old skulls in front of those people, each sensitive may give you a completely different history about it. So I think what's the most important about the crystal skulls is, granted, the ones that seem to be older have some really strong and powerful energies connected to them. But what we've been discovering, and especially since we have 16 personal crystal skulls in our collection, of which most of these are newly made skulls, is that they seem to work as a receptacle, especially if they're made from quartz, allowing other spiritual entities or dimensional beings or extraterrestrial beings or different spirits to work through the skulls, which kind of animate them. And, I'm kind of like a proud papa, and my partner Katrina Head is the proud mama, that when we work with our skulls, they've been able to create some really powerful, profound effects on the people who are meeting them, even though they're newly done skulls. So this is kind of a part that's not been talked about so much, how the energy of the skulls work, and whether these newer skulls have a value versus the older skulls. But one of our skulls has been in the presence of a lot of the older skulls, and it seems like he's received a lot of gifts. He calls them his older brothers and sisters.
Oh, wow.
So, but then that's also suggesting too that we're having some type of communication from our skulls, where they're talking with us and, literally saying, like, we want to go to the water of this lake that's nearby where we live, or we want to see crop circles, or we want to meet this skull, or, we want to participate in research. They're actually having a communication with us. What you might want to ask me a little bit later as we get more into it is we've been doing interviews with spiritual mediums for a new book, which will probably be called well, we have a series of travel log books where we've been talking about our travels, looking for crystal skulls in our experiences.
Yeah.
But I think this one we'll call the Paranormal Journey.
Right.
And this medium that we know here locally, who has these spirit guides that speak through her, they gave us some interesting insights and information as the medium was facing our skulls and having an interaction with them. So,
just going back to what you were talking initially, you were talking about the older skulls and how the Mayans, in your example, may have amended them in ways like much the same way the Egyptians amended the Sphinx. Are you saying that they're actually even older than Mayan times then, potentially at least?
Oh, most definitely. There's many people that we've met, including myself and Katrina, who have a memory of former lifetimes where the skulls existed in Atlantis and Lemuria. Atlantis would take us back 15,000 to at least 100,000 years ago, and Lemuria, I have no idea, it could be several 100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yes, much more older. Now, there was a conference I attended once in Sedona, Arizona, where there were some priests from Guatemala.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, in a message that they delivered for the conference, that they believed that some of the crystal skulls that they had, and the Mayans for the most part learned a very big lesson. When the Europeans came over, they started stealing and taking everything that they thought was of value, including some skulls. This has been proven because there are some crystal skulls that are with private owners in Europe, and also there was found a Spanish galleon, I think it was by the coast of Florida, where they actually found crystal skulls were inside of the galleon.
Right.
So the indigenous people quickly learned that they were not supposed to, discuss everything or share everything. So what has happened is they have actually, protected their crystal skulls. And so anyway, getting back to the conference, these Mayans, who I believe do have crystal skulls they're protecting, said they did not create them, that they either came from Atlantis or the, what do they call it? I can't remember the exact term. It was something like the fathers or, that's the best word I can think of. The fathers from the Pleiadians had brought the spells to them, meaning an extraterrestrial
That's
connection.
interesting.
Now,
so
I don't know how much you know about this, Basil, but there is a date that gets banded around all sorts of historical events, and that is the old 12,500 years ago date, which I think you kind of almost alluded to then as well. There's lots of things pointing towards 10,500 BC as being some kind of interesting time, shall I say, at least. Is that something you've come across with crystal skulls? I've seen it mentioned with Egypt and things like that, but I've never seen you mentioned a similar date.
Well, what I understand about that date, not necessarily with crystal skulls, although it could be connected, is purportedly around that time is when Atlantis supposedly was submerged under the water. And as I understand it, the Atlanteans had colonies all over the world. And what they did is they took some of their sacred tools and they took them to these colonies, which they could actually still be buried or existed or in time capsules or whatever. So the Mayans have implied that some of the crystal skulls they know about came from Atlantis. So it could have been possibly the Atlanteans brought these crystal skulls first to the Yucatan area in Mexico, and then they could have, moved around in different parts of Mexico. Because in Mexico itself, I've talked with people who say literally they kicked the ground and these artifacts just start emerging, including crystal skulls. Like, for example, there's a famous UFO researcher, he was a well-known journalist in Mexico, Jaime Maussan, who actually invited me to Mexico in 2009, and we have an ebook that we've actually created about 2 trips to Mexico in 2009, which people can find on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Apple, where he said that they were making a building, and this human-sized rose quartz skull, which he calls Rosie, just literally rode out of the ground as they were building the foundation of this building. And of course, the people doing it had no idea what this was. So he quickly was able to purchase the skull for a very little amount of money. So I think the date you're asking about, I think it's linked to when Atlantis sinks and then the people who survived brought these sacred tools all over the world. And I think some of the crystal skulls went to Mexico and Central America, and some went to Peru, because there's been one particular skull that I've had visions of, which actually the next book that we're going to release, which I hope will be ready by the end of this month, which is called The Search for the Blue Skull in Peru.
Yeah.
I believe that I had some visions when I was there where I saw, like, a flying craft using anti-gravity taking things to Peru, and I seem to be on board this ship. So I think they could have brought some crystal skulls there as well.
Is that how the skull communicates with you then? It sort of plants images in your mind when you talk about communicating with the skull?
Well, what I have found as I've talked to other people who we call guardians or custodians of crystal skulls, whether these are very old ones or new ones or etc., is it depends upon the guardian's spiritual gifts.
Yes.
So, for example, I'll contrast how I communicate with the skulls with how Katrina communicates with the skulls. And she's sitting over here, so if I say something wrong, she'll correct me. The way that they communicate with me is not so much in pictures, because I don't seem to be a good person for images. Sometimes I get images in my mind, and like when I'm writing about my experiences, then I'll kind of see what I was doing, but I never see things like in full color and full detail. It's kind of like, shadow and very basic form. So the way they're communicating with me is more telepathic. Like, I'm looking at our skulls right now, and the one that seems to be drawing me is the one we have called Rosalita, which is a human-sized rose quartz skull, 2 pieces, separate jaw, made by a master carver in China that we received at the end of October of last year. We've had some very interesting experiences with Rosalita, and Rosalita requested that we use this name for her, as well as other people, how they've responded to her since we received her. And what happens is, in my mind, are thoughts that don't seem to be coming from me. They're just, like right there. Or I will feel something, and that feeling I'm able, probably because I'm a writer and I'm Aries and I'm quick-witted, I'm able to translate very quickly into words what I'm feeling. So like right now, what I feel from her, she's just broadcasting this really loving energy, which hopefully will be sent and touching all your listeners who are listening to our interview today. But for me, it's more feeling and thoughts that come into my head that I know I'm not thinking. Now, in the case of Katrina, when I ask her, how are the skulls communicating, she says she hears distinct voices, and she knows by the different voices which one is speaking to her. And so she kind of does that. But she also, can feel things, and, she can get telepathic thoughts as well. She's very gifted with all of her gifts. So it just depends on the individual's gift. A lot of times what will happen with a guardian of a skull is they'll hear me talking and say, well, the skull has given me its name and it's telling me this, and the guardian say, well, I don't hear anything. I say, but do you feel something? And they'll say, yes, I do. So no one way is better than another. It's just that the crystal skull is able to link into the vibrational essence of the individual and knows what's the best way to communicate with them.
So it's down to the individual, basically.
Yeah, I really think so, because when you talk to guardians, as we've met so many in our travels and people talking to us on the internet, there are so many wide ranges of experiences that people are having that it's really it's really individual.
Yeah. You mentioned that you got a new crystal skull from China, from a master carver. I assume that's the right term. Now, I looked up when we first got talking about you coming on the show. I looked up crystal skulls, and first place I looked was eBay, and I see they're not cheap. They're pretty expensive, aren't they? I'm assuming that they take a long time to make.
Well, it depends on the skill of the carver. For example, we have another skull called Portal de Luz, which is a 10-pound smoky quartz skull made by the Brazilian carver Leandro da Silva. So after I received that skull in 1999, I think about a year later, I was able to go to Brazil And I visited with him, and I asked him, here's this skull you created. How long did it take you? He said it only took him 3 or 4 days to carve it, and a couple of other days to have his assistants polish it. Because when you carve quartz initially, you can't really see the shape that you're carving. You have to also polish it in order to be able to see the details properly. Now, I know with Rosalita, which is, I would say, maybe 25% to 30% larger than Porto, which means it's probably around 13 or 14 pounds. When I started talking with the carvers in China, they were telling me that the master carver who was making it, I think he said it was the end of September, and then the skull was delivered to us at the end of October. So it probably took him about 3 or 4 weeks to make it. And actually, this carver was interviewed for a special on National Geographic, which I was also on, called The Truth About the Crystal Skulls.
Yes, we've seen it.
Right. So I don't want to say too much about the program because I have some distinct comments, but I want to honor all the people who made it.
Yeah.
But in any case, I was able to see in that show this gigantic diamond tip wheel or saw that he had to make the skull. And then they also sent us pictures where he was drawing on the crystal where the eyes and the nose and mouth are going to go. But I think with these carvers, it's the same like any person who has a creative gift. Like I'm a musician. I can't tell you where the music comes from. I'm just playing randomly on my guitar, and all of a sudden I hear a melody and I start singing with it, and there's a song. Well, these carvers are the same. The ones I've met, they're extremely skilled. It's like they have this direct communication with the stone, and they know how to do it, and they just like maybe go into a trance or something like that.
Like automatic writing, but with carving, maybe.
I've ever heard that was carved.
Sorry, there I got a little bit of a slow connection today.
So.
Yeah, a bit like automatic writing.
Crystal skull yeah, exactly. But the most remarkable crystal skull that I saw was done by this man who unfortunately passed away called Moonhawk, who was in Colorado. He created a skull totally underwater, could not see what he was doing, and was totally guided by spirit. It had a very unusual form to it, but it was a very beautiful skull. So I think in some way the carvers have some communication with the stone or the spirit that's working through the stone, because this is what they tell me anyway, and they tell them how they want, the stone says how it wants to be carved. So it's very, you have to look at every part of the process of the creation of the skulls and how they're affecting people and their history and so on.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, when did you first become involved in the crystal skulls? How did you first discover them?
Well, I really never thought in my wildest dreams that this would be an area that I would be dedicating. It's going on almost 30 years now. But what happened is, again, being in Aries, I just have this sense of adventure. I always want new experiences.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to try new things. I'm not afraid to, go out on a limb, so to speak, and see where a new experience or a new travel is going to take me. So in 1983, I was traveling on faith. I had an opportunity to be in the San Jose, California area, and I had friends at a local bookstore there. Actually, the woman who owned it, she had a son who had the same birthday as I did. She was also an Aries like me. Her son, of course, was Aries, and she called it the Ram Metaphysical Bookstore. And one day I thought, I need to go over there and show her and see if she needs more copies of the first book I wrote, which was back in the early 80s, called Journeys of an Aquarian Age Networker, self-published book.
Okay.
And so I went into her store, and she threw out these pictures of a crystal skull that was made from amethyst, which today now has the name of Ami, which means friend, which actually I was involved in some research with that skull that produced this name back in 2001. Prior to that, it was just called the amethyst crystal skull.
Right.
So I was looking at the pictures, and I felt literally my body vibrating inside like there was an earthquake going on as I was looking at the picture.
Wow.
And a half an hour later, there was a real earthquake. I was in San Jose, California. So in Columbus, California, maybe 150 miles south, there was an earthquake, and the table the picture was sitting on was vibrating. So there was an inner and an outer earthquake. But what came from that meeting just of the picture was an inner knowing that the crystal skulls are vital for the future of humanity. Now, the thing is every one of us has certain moments in our life where we're offered a special opportunity that will take us in a direction. So it was kind of like the skulls were saying, okay, now that you know this, what are you going to do about it? Now, of course, the next thing that I wanted to do about it is I wanted to meet the skull. And fortunately, my friend Steve Mailer knew the guardians who had brought it was a Mayan priest from Mexico. They had this particular crystal skull, and so I was invited to, I guess it was like an art gallery. What had happened by this time is the Mayan priest who had brought the skull, he received a loan against the skull. So there was a group of businessmen who now had it, and the skull was in a art gallery in a locked container in a storage facility there. So they brought it out, and when I first saw the skull, I was allowed to touch it, and I literally felt like an energy moving from my hand, which touched it on the top part of the skull, all the way up from my hand to my shoulder. And then I had an image of that skull in my mind, like floating over my shoulder, which to this day it still remains. So that was my first contact. Then I had these pictures that I was given, and I would share them, and I thought that's the end of it. But then eventually I met the co-authors of my first book, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed, Bowen and Sereno, in the northern part of California in the later part of the 1980s. And we did this book, as I mentioned, and there I got a chance, to see more pictures, to meet some more skulls. And it just, from 1988, 1989, it just took off. And it's never stopped, and I have no clue how many different crystal skulls I've been in the presence of since that time. I would guess thousands.
Well, it must be.
That includes the older ones and the newer ones.
Well, you're talking nearly 30 years, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
I'm just wondering, you were talking about meeting skulls. Is there such a thing as an evil skull?
Good question.
Well, this is the way that I look at it. Everything that gets created is a tool to assist humanity, whether it's a tool for helping us to grow spiritually or it's a tool for challenges. Because the bottom line is I think each person, how we grow is we have different challenges that are placed in front of us. I mean, each person has certain things that come to them easily, like for me, information, making contacts, that's easy. But trying to get financial support sometimes for our research or the projects has been more challenging.
Yes.
Okay, but sometimes I think it's because I always see things too many years ahead of time, and it's a way of slowing me down to wait until it's the proper time.
Right.
So because the crystal skulls seem to have the ability to record everything that happens around them, there has been discussion, and I have met skulls like this, that certain skulls may have been used by civilizations in the past in their more darker stages, like when the Aztecs started doing sacrifices and so on. Yeah. And they decided to include the skulls in these sacrifices, where they would take a person's heart out and then they would put the skull inside of the body. So we have met a few skulls that have a very intense energy, but it's very heavy. Yeah. And it's kind of what we would say is a dark energy. So some people will then say, well, if there's only one crystal skull that's not there to offer a beneficial effect upon people, then they're all dark and they're all evil. And you see, we could say the same thing about people we meet. There are certain people we meet, the most wonderful person you ever want to meet, helping everybody, very cheerful, great jokes, and the whole thing brings the energy of a room up. And then there's other people who are totally into themselves that don't give a darn about anyone else and will take every situation to their benefit and don't care what is the consequences of their action. So we call this, of course, good and evil. So the same thing can be true with crystal skulls. We have met a few where they have absorbed literally man's inhumanity to man because it's kind of a recording device. However, what I have found is the ones that I sense, and this is just going with my feeling or intuition, that are extremely old. I think that there's a living consciousness inside of those skulls, and they have a protection system that does not allow them to be interfered or to be misused in any way.
Or manipulated.
Exactly. Whereas maybe copies of these skulls done over the years, used by people, less primitive or, who are working more in black magic or whatever you want to call it. They picked up those energies. So we've heard from people too sometimes where they've bought a skull and they've had an adverse effect to it. But there is a way to cleanse the skull, and there are techniques which we recommend to people to do if that comes up that they can try to clear this energy that's inside of it. It would be the same thing like, you have priests, there's somebody who's possessed by some demon or spirit. They go in and they try to use a technique to clear it. The same thing
Don't
is
start Basil talking about possessions. It's his pet subject. Please just don't mention it. Joshua, there are going to be a number of people listening to this who are going to say, what on earth are you on about? This is all completely insane. What have you got scientific-wise to back this up? Because there are going to be probably more than a few people that say this is all just complete nonsense.
Well, I know that this is true. I mean, like when there was part for the National Geographic show that was put on the internet, I read the comments of people who were listening to my little segment where I was discussing some of the things I've talked to you about, and they basically were saying this man is totally insane and crazy, and there's no way an inanimate object as a quartz skull or a other gemstone type of skull can have a living consciousness. Even on the show The Truth About Crystal Skulls, they tried to show it was impossible. So scientifically, it's been difficult to get scientists involved to help us to do research. So the only research I can speak of is from the following perspective. The one thing that I can say that I've noticed consistently with the crystal skulls, depending upon who are their guardians, especially for the new ones or the ancient ones, is there is a force or an energy called electromagnetic energy. In the Indiana Jones film, they showed only a magnetic energy linked to the crystal skull they were portraying. That's not how it works in real life. It's more of an electromagnetic energy that is profoundly affecting people who are in the presence of these skulls. So this we have observed repeatedly. So what I thought was, is there any way that we can measure or look at this energy that the skulls are projecting, which is affecting people? So over the years, starting in 2000, I've had access to different type of electronic devices. The one that I've used the most, which I've used because it gives very precise numbers, is called a meridian stress test system, but it has different names.
Is it like a tri-field device? Is it like one of those types of things?
I'm not sure. I don't know it by that name. I do know that in Europe, when I was living in Europe, which was between 2001 and 2007, that there were medical doctors who would use this device. Now, let me explain what this device is. It is a machine that has an electrode, which is able to touch different meridians in the body, primarily on the hands and the feet, and make a measurement. And each of these meridians somehow is linked to either an organ in the body or a system in the body. Now, what makes this very precise is that our human body does not lie on the condition of what a person is in. If you have, let's say, a problem in the heart or a problem in your kidneys or whatever, there is a meridian associated with that which will show that measurement as either being an illness in that part of your body, or it could also be like a pressure or an anxiety. So the way the machine does is it has a measurement from 0 to 100, where if the meridian that's being tested is equal to 50, that's perfect balance. If it's lower, it's an illness, and if it's higher, then it's kind of an anxiety or a pressure on the system. And what we did is, and this suggestion came from Bill Holman, who's the guardian of, I consider, the most well-known crystal skull in the world, the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, which is actually linked to the Mitchell-Hedges family that comes from England.
Right.
Is he said, what you need to do when you test somebody is if they know they're being tested with the skull, they're going to have an expectation of doing better, because our mind is really powerful. And there are scientists who know that if somebody wants to believe in a theory that one scientist has, he can actually make his experiments confirm that theory just by his power of belief. So what we did is we blindfolded the people and we tested them with three things. Nothing, which we would call baseline, so we could see, okay, where are their meridians before they're exposed to anything. Then we would test them with a material the same as the crystal skull. So, for example, if we're using Portal de Luz, which is a smoky quartz crystal, we would take a piece of smoky quartz, just a regular quartz, test people with that, and then we would test them with the skull. But we blindfolded them, and we haven't told them, like, what are we testing you with? And we would get these measurements. And what the measurements showed, especially when we were working with Portal de Luz, is between 85 and 90% of the readings were either the same or better than baseline, which is pretty significant.
Yeah.
And also we were seeing in some other tests where we used other devices that kind of were measuring the aura, where you put your hand on a magnetic plate, and of course the meridian stress test system is connected to a computer as the aura is, so it's able to take totally accurate readings on everything. One of the researchers, I think this was in Holland, said that Portal de Luz was figuring out 2 or 3 areas that were weak in the person, and that's where he was focusing his energy to help that individual, and we would notice a significant improvement. Now, the only test that we couldn't do, although this was done when we did the same research for the Sci-Fi Channel in America, which did a 2-hour documentary in 2008, just prior to the Indiana Jones film coming out that year, is we were able to do the same test with the Mitchell-Hedges skull. And what we noticed with the Mitchell-Hedges skull is that after a person was exposed to it, like these advanced readings, they would continue. So we couldn't really test them with anything else, because the improvement that we saw would continue. Whereas with the newer skulls, we would see it while the person was being exposed, but how long that energy would continue was not as consistent. But anyway, through this test, we were able to see that there was some kind of energy the skulls were broadcasting that was affecting people. And we also did another test where we took 2 skulls that had not worked with anyone. They were like brand new, just made. We had them tested with somebody first in this state. Then we put them next to Portal de Luz for about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We retested the person with those skulls, and they showed an improvement. So also another thing which proves what I've experienced, especially taking Portal de Luz and our other skulls around what we call the older brothers and sisters, is that there can be a transfer of energy from one to another, or a gift. Like, for example, Portal de Luz was next to the skull Ami. Ami, the amethyst skull that I first saw, was able to help one of its guardians who had a blood vessel in his head not growing properly. They did an operation to correct it, and he became like a vegetable. So he's able to communicate to his family, put the back of my head on the ground to the back of this amethyst skull of me. And he just kept thinking, I'm going to be perfectly well, I'm going to be perfectly well, and he was healed. Then Portal de Luz, which was next to that skull, when we were doing private sessions with our skull with people in Poland, there were 3 men who all picked Portal de Luz, who had the exact same problem as this gentleman who was the guardian of the skull. I mean, they decided which skull to pick, and they all received, a healing benefit during the session to this problem, because the blood vessel affects coordination and ability to speak and communicate. So these are, I could call these kind of like scientific tests, you know, but we haven't been able to get really a really good scientific researcher to say, these are very mysterious. I want to join you. I want to help you. I want to do some kind of test that's really following true scientific principles. I did have one archaeologist who did see the Mitchell Hedges skull, and he was really blown away from it. But he said, look, I can't talk about this because my reputation would be destroyed. I really honor you that you're going out and talking about this and not worrying about it if people are calling you crazy or whatever. But I can't talk about my experience because other archaeologists would look at me like I'm crazy. See, I don't care if people think I'm crazy or not. I think if you get involved in the paranormal and the spiritual world, there are going to be people who think you're crazy. But as we go closer and closer towards the end of this year, whatever is going to happen related to the Mayan prophecy, which I don't believe is the end of the world end of the world, but it might be. You may see things that may forever change our world this year. As we continue to go forward into the future, the paranormal is going to start becoming the normal.
Well, speaking of the paranormal, you mentioned there earlier, what kind of a communication would a medium, you say, have with a skull? Would that be different from an ordinary person?
Well, a medium who is a person that has the gift to step aside and to allow other consciousness to speak through. If we use the session that we just had on Monday with our friend Teresa, who it's like her spirit guides, they just come into her like very quickly. And all of a sudden they're there and you're talking to a totally different personality and person. What she was describing was, and this was kind of a confirmation of what we felt, is spirit is always looking at a way to communicate with humanity. And of course, if you've studied mediumship over the years, like I read a book, and especially starting in the 1800s, we had a number of mediums, trance mediums, who different spirits would come through and speak, and there were apports, which are objects that came from nowhere that would just appear. Or in the case of the skull experiment, which was done in England, and Skull England from 1993 to 1998, they had all kinds of physical manifestation of the existence of spirit. So when Teresa was sitting and she was talking to the skull, this last session we asked her to say, okay, before you said there's like an intelligence, there are spirits that are using the crystal skull in order to have conversations with us. Because, when you kind of look at a skull, it looks like a person. Or at least when I look at the skulls, I'm not afraid of their shape. And when I'm talking with them, it's like I'm talking to you guys, except it's some other being who doesn't have a physical body but has a living consciousness. So what I think is happening is different spirits. First of all, it depends who the guardian is, because that spirit is going to have some connection with that person. Maybe they had past lives together, or maybe that person is what we call a star person, which means they're an ET soul that's incarnate into the body. So it could be somebody from their home that's going to work through the skull. But there's just these different spirits working with the guardian that come through and animate the skull like it's, a living consciousness. So it could be coming from anywhere. That's what she was saying. So she was going through with Portal de Luz. I remember she was saying it was a being from another totally different galaxy. And she said, if we meditated with the skull, our third eye to the third eye of the skull, this being that's working through the skull would be able to show us what their galaxy was like. So, it's hard to say again, because every skull seems to have a different personality, different likes. It could even be, let's say somebody who's passed away, their spirit might work through the skull. So it will give the skull the appearance, let's say if it was a child who died, of a young child. It's really difficult to say.
Yes.
In the experiences that I've had with what I call the ancient or very old skull, there seems to be information and knowledge and an intelligence inside of that is coming from a very long time ago, that has knowledge and information far beyond anything that we've seen in the modern time. So, I wish there was a way we could research this more in a scientific way, but it's very difficult. It has to be done in a paranormal way, because the way the spirit is communicating is more through, our spiritual senses.
Yeah. Talking about research, we talked before, a little bit before we came on, and you were saying that you're trying to get funding to do research to find out exactly what these things do and what they're capable of. How are you getting on with that?
Well, I created several years ago a nonprofit organization called the World Mystery Research Center, but apparently I didn't maintain it. I mean, I just got too busy and too many other things, and one person can only do so much.
Yeah.
So we're hoping eventually in the future to create another nonprofit where we can do a joint scientific and paranormal research into the skull. But as to date, we really haven't anyone who's stepped forward and said, I believe this research is vital and important, and I have some funds, or I want to make a donation, I want to help you. It's pretty much all the research we've done has come out of my own pocket, and through the generosity of the people who have allowed us to use their equipment, or the people who volunteered to be test subjects.
Yeah, because realistically, I mean, the crystal skulls are already out there. People already own them. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, compared to, let's say, developing a vaccine or something, the research for this is actually going to be comparatively cheap, I would think.
Well, I don't know. There are so many different ways that it can be approached. Some of the equipment that we've used probably cost a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
If a scientist actually said, this is very intriguing and I don't care about my reputation and I want to find out what this is about, it's kind of the same situation with the UFOs.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, UFO researchers would say, if we're having contact with extraterrestrial beings, this could be the most important thing that's ever happened in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
Well, what if these very old skulls that we're finding are the ancient computers of civilizations of the past, or from extraterrestrials themselves?
And to quantify that, modern science is actually using various crystals as data storage. That actually is science fact.
Absolutely. They're using lasers to store on a molecular level data and information. But what I'm talking about is information that has been recorded, like the crystal skulls work, let's say, like a video camera, where they have recorded pictures and images from the entire history of our planet, or there have been, let's say, other people, because I have this vision in my head that won't go away, that one day we're going to develop a monitor we're going to attach to a crystal skull, and all of a sudden there's going to be like a person that's going to be on the screen starting to talk to us and saying something like, I've been waiting for you guys to come up with this advanced technology so we could communicate with you in the future all this great knowledge and information that we had in the past. So it's kind of like if you took a DVD and went back 100 years ago and told people, on this single disc is an entire library of books, are moving pictures, is music. They would laugh at you and say, what are you, crazy? Yeah. Because they didn't have a device that could read it. So that's how I see the crystal skulls. These are devices from the past which we haven't developed the technology yet that's allowing us to know what's inside of them. So, I think there's a lot of research that could be done and some profound information that could come out. We could better understand what's the energy that's around the skull that's healing people or helping them to have more clarity in their life. So, it's really amazing when you think about it. All it is a piece of stone in the shape of a skull. Yet all the things that are happening to people and all the experiences that they're happening around it are almost like science fiction and fantasy, but it's really going on. Which leads me to the next area that we're trying to get support, which is we actually have a script for an action-adventure film that shows one of the legends, which is talked about through some of the indigenous people, about 13 so-called original crystal skulls coming together. We actually have a whole script that's completely done for this. Again, I haven't had any success trying to get it out there. There's, I think, a one-page summary was presented to the man who helped to create National Treasure, but he said, well, Indiana Jones film had 13 skulls in it, and then there was a movie about 2012 because we were talking about maybe this end of 2012, these skulls come together, but now I'm kind of feeling more that it's going to be more into the future, several years down the road. So we do have a script for that. So the only choice we have this year is we're creating the novelization of that, which will probably come out as ebooks, and we're going to do it in like pieces, like how Flash Gordon used to be shown when my father was a young boy.
Correct.
It would show one part, and then you'd have to wait a week or two, and you get the next part. So that's what we're going to do with the story, is release it in parts.
Have you ever heard of Max Kaiser, the financial expert, we would call him?
Yeah.
No, actually, I've not.
Right. Well, he's on Russia Today and a few other TV channels. He has a website. I think it's called piratemyfilm.com. And the whole idea is that you present your idea and the public contribute to the fund for making your film. And it's like a crowdsourced filmmakers website. Might be something you should have a look at maybe as well, because it might be right up your street, certainly.
So it's called paramyfilm.com?
Pirate My Film, I think it's called, if I remember correctly.
And the man's name is Max. What was the last name?
Max Kaiser.
Kaiser. Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, that might be something to look at.
That's what I always find the most interesting about working with the crystal skulls, is there's always the new journey.
Yes.
It's like always something new comes up. It's a new adventure, a new way to see a different perception of it. Or the other thing that's happening to us, and it's been happening actually quite a bit this year, is we're getting contact from several people who are like talking about, well, my grandfather gave a skull in Mexico. Nobody ever heard of the skull. I don't know what to do with it. Some other man wrote to us, I guess, representing another family in Mexico that was poor, was showing us all these Mayan artifacts and crystal skulls that they've held for a long time. So you just never know what's going to come up next, and that's perfect for me because, I really think that the essence of who I am is to share the absolute best information that we uncover as we're doing all of these travels, and try to help make sense for other people, what's really going on and who are we truly. We're spiritual beings having an adventure in the physical reality at this moment.
Having an experience. I was just wondering, if I wanted to buy a crystal skull, where would I source one from? Where would be a good place, or is it a good idea for me to buy one?
Well, I think that the crystal skulls is a great tool for everybody, but I think the person needs to have an affinity for it. So as you mentioned before, on eBay, of course, there are skulls. Now, we also do offer crystal skulls ourselves. We have contacts in China and Brazil. We generally sell smaller skulls because that's what people can afford. But what we'll do is we'll charge those skulls if they come to us first with our own. And people have really loved that. It really awakens the crystal and helps them to prepare for the individual. So, and then, of course, we also do after sales support, which means if anybody has a question, how to work with their skull, how to activate it, or meditate with it, or whatever, then we kind of support them with that as well.
Because you do training as well, don't you?
Well, I don't know if we really do training. We give a lot of suggestions for people, and we just answer people's questions. But
you have webinars and that kind of thing, don't you, though?
Right, that's what we're starting up now. We're working with ATW, Awakening Truth Worldwide in Vancouver. We now have our own classroom, and we also have our own radio show, too, that we're doing monthly through ATW. So, people can listen to that, or we have a free newsletter they can join, a free ebook. So there's a lot of information that we offer to people that they can get. I don't know if it would be the right time to give out an email or a website.
Go for it. All your links are on our website if people want to look there, alternativefutureradio.com, but be free to give them out again.
Oh, please do.
Okay, well, the main email we have is Crystal Skull Explorers, that's plural, at gmail.com. And we have two main websites, either whatarecrystalskulls.com or crystalskullexplorers.com. So either of those two websites will help people to find us and find out how they can get the free ebook or the newsletter, or we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter, and we're just exploring every way we can to share with people. We even have some videos on YouTube, so all that information is available through these websites.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Now you have mentioned there several times the Mayan prophecy linked to 2012.
That's what I was going to ask. Can you let me to it again?
Is there something we should be concerned about? or happy about, or...
Well, the only thing that I can share about this is what I've received from what I call my spirit guides, and I've also checked with other people as well. So this would be kind of what my sensing is about what 2012 represents, and the date December 21st, 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar, rather, which they call the Mayan prophecy too. A lot of people have speculated that the world might be destroyed on this day. I feel I have an ability or a gift to move into the future by talking to myself who is in the future. And when I do this, and my future self says his name is Argus, so I guess my name will change over some period of time. I see a golden age. I see us living in communities. I see total world peace. So I don't believe that this date is going to end the world. Now, the other sensing that I get, and this comes from, I guess you could say, invisible people that are around me who I don't see, but I feel and I kind of hear them talking, let's say, is that the year of 2012 is going to initiate some new events or activities, not of a disaster kind, but I don't want to use this word, but I don't know how else to say it, kind of a shock kind, but more along the lines of what true reality is about. For example, consider the following concept. Let's say there was a famous person who dies that all of a sudden shows up in the physical. Now, according to our science that we understand, this shouldn't be possible. When you're dead, you don't come back. Because this is kind of what was ascribed to Jesus Christ, is that, he was killed, he was a martyr, and all of a sudden he comes back to his apostles and starts talking with them. Of course, from a paranormal point of view, there exists this possibility, since we are spiritual beings, and also this is exactly what happened in the skull experiment. As they were creating the proper energy vortex and energy door, there were spiritual beings who physically manifested and were walking around them, that they were able to talk to, they were able to feel, having contact on their body. So if life after death is shown without a shadow of a doubt to exist, and there's a lot of evidence for this. I mean, many people have died temporarily.
Yes, we're speaking to somebody.
We've actually got a guest on next week, I think, who's died twice.
Right. So, they've gone somewhere else and they come back. Or the same thing, as we're interviewing the mediums for this book, I'm asking these spirits, what is it like where you are? I mean, do you have form? How does consciousness survive? Now, one concept that was shared through a medium that channeled Frederick Myers, who was one of the 3 people that created the Society of Psychical Research, which happened in the late 1800s, the first scientific society to research the paranormal. After he died in 1901, in the 1930s, he started communicating through a medium with the last name of Cummings, and I just finished one of the books that was channeled from him.
I think
so
I'm
it was kind of like
it.
telepathic communication. And what he was saying is we have this etheric body that is a double of the physical body, and that when you die, when these silver cord, he talked about 2 silver cords, not just one, in the solar plexus and one linked into the head. When you die, your personality, your memories, and everything that is an essence of who you are is retained in the etheric energy body. So like if you're going to speak through a medium, your soul can say, hey, that was one of my favorite lifetimes, being Joshua Shapiro. I'll just become Joshua Shapiro so the people I'm talking to can relate to me as a person.
Right.
Which is exactly what's happened with this medium that we work with on Tuesday, one of our guides with Saul. And it was like, I'm talking to Saul, but Saul, of course, being in spirit, he knew a lot more about who I was than I knew what he was. But we're having this conversation, and he's offering some amazing things.
Yeah, I think we're losing the connection there, Joshua. I don't know if you can hear us, but we're about up to the hour anyway. Joshua, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but thank you for calling in. I don't know if you can still hear us there.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, the connection's dropping out there at the moment. We're struggling, but we're up to the hour anyway.
Okay.
So we just want to say thank you for calling, and we're probably going to have to get you back again because I've got a big page full of questions I didn't even get to touch today.
It's been absolutely marvellous, Joshua, speaking to you.
The same for
the joys of wireless internet.
me as well, and happy to come back.
Oh, wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was Joshua Shapiro, who is a expert, one would say, on crystal skulls, and his details for his websites and so on are all on our website, www.alternativefutureradio.com.
AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Stalk us on Twitter @OutThereHour. Send hate mail to helpdesk@AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Insult us at Facebook.com/OutThereHour. Troll us on YouTube.com/AFRadioYT. Send us questions for upcoming guests, make requests, or just complain. It's all good. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Very weird, in fact.
Well, unfortunately, our communication broke down with Joshua.
Yeah, maybe we should have used a crystal skull.
I think we should get one.
Although, to be honest with you, 2 yogurt pots and a piece of string would be better than the internet connection that we've got. Oh dear!
What a nice man.
You signal fires. Yeah, very nice chap.
Nice guy, interesting actually. And again, it's just we're getting to the end of the hour, and
they drop the interest bomb on us
because I knew all about that story about the medium and the what was he talking about? Those silver threads or something from you to your spirit body.
And we've got all manner of past experiences. I can see your notes from here. One name's popping out there,
and I was dying to ask him about Tina Fiorda because what they were saying was
sounds very similar.
Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I was going to write it down myself, but I saw you pick up the pen.
I was dying to say Tina Fiorda because it was awfully similar.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how when you speak to these people, how similar their stories are, even though they're coming from greatly different angles.
Yeah. Oh, completely. We've seen that so many times with so many different people who are completely unrelated.
Especially the Nazis.
They seem to be a common thread.
But they keep popping up.
They do. Pesky.
We're going to have to talk about that
Pesky
seriously
Nazis.
in one of these shows.
Yeah, we are. We're having a Nazi special.
I thought when he was talking about celebrities coming back from the dead, I thought he was going to tell us that Michael Jackson was going to come back. Did you?
Oddly enough, those exact words were on my lips. I was just about to say I look forward to Michael Jackson's next album, but thankfully I had more tact than to say it.
You had more tact.
At least one of us did, anyway.
Oh, it was great. Well, he said, I think I just called him there just about. He said he'd be happy to come back on, so maybe we can get him back on in a month or two.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because he's got so much more to say.
He has, lots to say. Unlike us. We've got very little to say.
It's been a great show. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And, we'll see you next time. Look out for more great guests.
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Microscope, you'd probably see circular tool marks or different marks on the surface. So this has caused some difficulty because some of the skulls that we believe to be ancient, or I'm calling them very old, some of them have these tool marks, and it could be a situation where, let's say, the head Mayan shaman says to his master carver, look, I don't like the way the skull looks, I want you to change it. And as soon as their tools touch the skull, then for, say, archaeologists or scientists, they say, oh, no, this is a fake. It's a modern made skull. Maybe it was done in Germany. Eder Oberstein in Germany has a lot of amazing carvers there who are very skilled and considered to be master carvers.
Yeah.
So then what happens is another way to identify them is to work with people who are sensitive. So I'm assuming that's part of what being out there means, working with the spiritual and the paranormal. And then the challenge is when you place some of these very old skulls in front of those people, each sensitive may give you a completely different history about it. So I think what's the most important about the crystal skulls is, granted, the ones that seem to be older have some really strong and powerful energies connected to them, but what we've been discovering, and especially since we have 16 personal crystal skulls in our collection, of which most of these are newly made skulls, is that they seem to work as a receptacle, especially if they're made from quartz, allowing other spiritual entities or...
We should now have Mr. Joshua Shapiro on the line. Do we have you there, Mr. Joshua Shapiro?
Let me check. It's still early morning here. Yes, I'm definitely here and ready to go.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we were just doing a little bit of an intro there, but our lack of knowledge in crystal skulls is tremendous.
It's evident.
It's great. So we did what we could, but you are the go-to guy for crystal skulls. So, where do we start with crystal skulls? What are they?
I think the most obvious question: what is a crystal skull?
Yeah,
and how would you define it?
Well, there's two definitions that I would give to it. One is the traditional definition that most people use, which is exactly as the term implies. We're talking about a skull that's made out of different types of gemstones, which could be in the shape of a human bone skull or human type of skull. And initially, when the crystal skulls first came out, they were, more like human bone skulls. But as we've progressed and we've gone into the 21st century, we now have modern carvers that are making crystal skulls from every type of gemstone you can imagine, and also in all different shapes, not just human bone, but also animal, monkey, dragon, whatever you can imagine, the people are carving it. And so they're just today compressing all of it. But there are three different types of, let's say, quartz crystal skulls or older skulls that are talked about, which is either contemporary or new, which would be the ones made by modern carvers today, primarily using diamond tip tools.
Yeah.
There would be old crystal skulls, which would be ones made 100 years ago to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. Different researchers.
They're the ones that we were just mentioning that we used to have a TV program over here called Arthur C. Clarke's. What was it called?
A Mysterious
World. Yeah, and on the beginning there was a crystal skull, and we've all seen reports of these old crystal skulls that date back to a long time before the technology existed to make them.
Right.
What can you tell us about those? Because literally, I think we know very little about them other than they're mysterious.
Right. Well, the ones that you're talking about have been called ancient crystal skulls, which are the ones made from, say, over 2,000 years to whenever, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000.
Yeah.
And so for these, basically what happened is in the 1800s, there were a number of these skulls that were coming out of Mexico near or within ancient ruins like Mayan or Aztec ruins.
Right.
And eventually some of them went into museums, and then people who had them privately started sharing them or selling them. And just as we went into the 20th century, more of them came out. But the problem with the ancient skulls, as far as I know, there isn't an exact scientific technology that we can use that can clearly define, how old is the creation of a skull.
Yeah.
For example, in some of the recent documentaries, what they've done is they've looked for carvers' tool marks on the surface of a crystal. Like if you take a modern skull and use the high-powered...
You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. Will take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Hello, everybody. My name's Mark. We're also joined with Basil. Today it's the Out There Hour. We're going to have a jolly good time investigating crystal skulls.
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Yay! Wow.
We fell off the edge.
Life on the edge.
How are you this afternoon?
Not too bad. Quite excited, moderately giddy.
Yeah, same here. I'm a little bit nervous.
My giddy is slight to moderate, force 6.
We're talking to a real-life Indiana Jones.
I thought you weren't going to say that.
You begged me not to say that, didn't you? Yeah, sorry.
I hope he doesn't listen to this because he's going to come for you in the night.
Picture Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Is that what it's called? I couldn't remember. I thought it was World of Strange Powers or something. I couldn't remember the name of it.
It's had some different names. When I was watching it was Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
It was World of Strange something when I saw it.
And one of the spooky things on the beginning of it was this great
the intro, yeah.
crystal skull.
Massive big thing.
Massive big thing.
But look, massive anyway.
And that's what we're here today to discover.
Ooh.
What is the crystal skull?
I think there's more than one.
And I think there's more than one. And we're speaking to expert.
Expert, yes. The expert.
Joshua Shapiro.
Yep. He is the world-leading expert on crystal skulls. There's no other way of saying it. He's the go-to guy for crystal skull.
Yeah, he's the expert on it, so that's why we're going to ask him today.
Yeah. We've got a lot of questions to ask him. Well, I'm looking forward to it. He's quite big. He's his own. I think he's got a series going on TV soon as well. I think he mentioned.
Yeah, he's often been on the Discovery Channel on American TV.
Yeah,
anything to do with crystal skulls.
Yeah.
Joshua's the man to speak to.
Yep, indeed.
We've got some questions ourselves.
Yes, indeed.
Along the lines of...
What on earth are they?
What on earth are they?
Where they came from. What is more interesting is I've been looking at his website and I've been looking at one of his webinar type things. They're actually using new ones. And they use them. They are actually a tool.
They're a tool for spirituality and
some kind of conduit, I think.
Perhaps even psychic power, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But these things, we were discussing them recently, Mark. They're thousands of years old. There's some of them that are thousands of years old.
Yep.
And the technology wasn't there to create them. So how on earth were they made?
Yeah.
Could be something we could ask him.
This is it. Yeah, we shall have to do that.
Looks like you're gearing up to ring him already.
I'm geared. Shall we go over to him?
Let's take the plunge.
Okay, all things being equal, we